This is the dark and mysterious lecture for European history. For Tuesday, the 14th of December, 2021. And we're going to start out with some images and videos. But first, I've got to pause because of the video. Okay, so the guillotine is a new and improved, you got to say it that way, form of execution, which is in keeping with the modern scientific notions of the French Revolution. And you just saw it in operation and how quickly it worked. The French used the guillotine for capital punishment until the late 1950s or early 1960s. Okay. So we're going to go over a few images before we go in. What do you think this is? It's not from France, from England.
King Charles I.
King Charles I. That's right. He looks like the guy who played him, which was Sir Alec Guinness. He was a Cavalier, obviously the leader of the Cavaliers, the royal party. Oliver Cromwell, pictured warts and all. You will note a big giant wart here and some other warts all around his face. And Cromwell, the dictator of England, Lord Protector, insisted upon being shown warts and all. Here's Georges Danton. Boldness, boldness, and more boldness, and the fatherland will be saved. And you can see sort of a man that you can picture in an inn drinking wine or beer and carousing with the boys, maybe playing some cards. And then there's this guy. Look at the eyes. That's Maximilian Robespierre, the incorruptible, the prim and proper, guardian of virtue and promulgator of terror, the heart of the French Revolution in its most active phase, and the great role model of many of my communist professors in college. Yes?
Can you show us a picture of his suit, the one with like the guillotine on them? Or
I can try. Let's see. So, what we'll do... Yeah, you could get your own Robespierre merch. Nope, not in my 5-second so-called research, but there's plenty of evidence. There's actually a video of Robespierre with the guillotine buttons, but it was from a production called The Scarlet Pimpernel, which is fiction. But it did include that little bit of detail from history. Sorry. Okay. Here we have Jean-Paul Marat, killed by that horrible wench Charlotte Corday, because she thought, with him gone, my country can return to normal. Marat's in his tub with a work table for Marat by Jacques-Louis David, the great painter of the French Revolution. Here's the list that Corday gave him. Here's the knife she used to kill him, to martyr him. Does anyone recognize the pose? Because we've talked about this pose already this year. And since it's dark, you may have to wave your hand if I don't see you. Anyone recognize the pose that Marat's body is in?
Like a pieta?
On the nose, Miss Montgomery, you rock. It is a pieta. Instead of the body of Christ being cradled by his mother after it was taken down from the cross, the body of the martyr of the revolution in a complete lack of subtlety, is cradled by his tub. But it's the exact same posture. The arm, the head. But he's the hero of the revolution, not of some Jewish cult that Greeks became credulous of. So yes, you'll be expected to know this painting of the death of Marat, but also that it is a Pietà.
Ah, what a handsome man.
When the time comes, which will be soon, maybe even today, this is Nappy Baby. Napoleon Bonaparte, the Corsican bandit who almost took over Europe, in his famous "What is wrong with my right hand" pose, which he uses in so many paintings. And in other paintings, his hand is obscured. Now, Napoleon is short because British and French feet are different, and the British used the difference to make Napoleon seem shorter than he was. But this is the source of much humor, which I will show you in a moment. To show you. Time Bandits was a 1980 movie made by the people who did Monty Python. And it's about a bunch of dwarves fleeing from God through space and time with a map, a treasure map. And they come to Napoleon's time, and he loves them because they're shorter than he is. That's what he likes, little things hitting each other. But that's a legend. The reality of Napoleon is that he was just of low average height. But it's still funny to me. See the movie, you may like it, it's clever. Anyway, where we were. You saw the Marat painting, you saw Robespierre. One definition I had not given you earlier. Many of our founding fathers were Christian, but many others were what are called deists. D-E-I-S-T-S, or deism. They believed in deism, D-E-I-S-M. Now, deists who believe in deism believe that there is, in fact, a great maker of the universe. However, they believe in this creative force without reference to any Christian scripture or dogma, theology, or understanding. So a deist is someone who believes, yes, there is a God of some kind, you can call him God for lack of a better term, that made everything, set it in motion. That's the common idea. It is a basic belief in some kind of creator. That's it. Everything else is optional. So you should know that. Okay. So we have talked about the course of the revolution and its intensification under Maximilien Robespierre, the Incorruptible. Now, what is the heart of the ideology of the revolution? Well, that's not from Robespierre. That's from a man named Jacques-Marie Hebert. Jacques-Marie Hebert believes that the heart of Western civilization, and he's not wrong about this, is Christianity. And the only way you're going to change Western civilization into the new utopia is to destroy Christianity in the hearts and minds of the people. So Hebert launches a campaign of de-Christianization that is mildly supported by Robespierre because it increases terror. And remember, terror without virtue is monstrous, but virtue without terror is useless. So look in your notes, and you will see a strange calendar. Look for the calendar. It's there, near the maps. It's with the picture of Leviathan that you saw, with Thomas Hobbes, the cover of Thomas Hobbes' book. Now, the revolutionaries of France at least had more guts than a lot of modern woke people, because they didn't just try to de-Christianize the current calendar, but they decided to create an entirely new one. Today, we have a bunch of people, mainly the kind of people who think that saying Happy Holidays is significantly better than saying Merry Christmas because somehow it's less religious, even though you're wishing somebody Happy Holy Days, which is what holidays are. And their idea of religious freedom is nobody expresses their religion. So instead of saying Super Solstice, Quasi Kwanzaa, Happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, you say Happy Holidays. And it's sort of neutral and generic, and everyone will be happy. Oh, and these people also came up with the, or encouraged the use of the BCE and CE dating systems. So we are in the year 2021 Common Era, CE. And I think Caesar was killed in the year 33 years before the Common Era, or BCE. But, as I've pointed out, you may recall, what starts the Common Era? What causes the Common Era to come into being?
The birth of Jesus.
The birth of Christ! As discovered by St. Jerome. As calculated by him 500 years after the fact. So, it's a non-Christian name for a very Christian calendar. 2021 years since the birth of Christ. But what is the Common Era? It's so much better than calling it before Christ and Anno Domini like, I don't know, traditional people like myself. The French revolutionaries, at least, understood the implications of what they were talking about. Hebert was an enemy of the faith in every way you can think of, because he saw the Christian faith as holding mankind back with superstitions. And he saw the church as a giant con game. So, we have here the revolutionary calendar of France, which has a number of new months with 10-day weeks and a holiday period at the end. Now, what is the point of this calendar? Well, when you have 10-day weeks and new months and everything is different, the whole Genesis story of God and 7-day creationism is easy to forget. When's Easter? Hell, after a while, when's Sunday? Those stupid, regressive, knuckle-dragging Christians, they can barely count anyway. So let's make a calendar that's rational, based on 10, right? Like a decimal calendar. And that calendar is going to be our calendar for the revolution. And we'll start with the years, is it the year zero? I think they start with the year zero. Because zero has been discovered, so year zero, then year one, and so forth. And I think the year zero was when they killed the king. In any event, in this new calendar, all of the old saints' days, which had been, sort of the way you mark the year going by, Advent, Lent, Easter, forget all that. It's day 9 of Floreal, which, is sort of where April was, but Floreal, the flowering month. Or it's day 10 of the second week of Thermidor, which is the hot month. Not when lobster is served, that's a lobster Thermidor joke, but Thermidor as in hot, thermometer, Thermidor, and that's where July used to be, sort of. But it's not exact. And the purpose of all of this is to break the hold that Christianity has on the people of France. It's not about Catholics versus Huguenots. It's about secularists versus believers. And the secularists have the government, and the believers get the guillotine. Remember, the first estate was the clergy. So the Roman Catholic clergy is seen by many revolutionaries as a supporter and a participant in all the crimes of the Ancien regime, and therefore the church is targeted. It's no accident that a huge number of the victims of the September massacres were priests, monks, and nuns, altar boys, and devout believers, deacons, and so forth. Anyone who was too Catholic, or because the Protestants had all been kicked out, was liable to be targeted for death. So we have a new calendar. We have new honorifics. We're no longer Madame, Monsieur. We're citoyen. Everyone's a citizen. Now, Robespierre was more cynical than Hebert. Hebert thought that everyday people, could live without religious faith. And that in one generation, by applying enough force, deadly force, you can break people of their Christianity. After all, that worked so well for the Romans. But Robespierre has a different idea. He says that everyday people are not necessarily as rational as we would want them to be. Maybe in a couple of generations, after we educate them in revolutionary schools, they will be able to live without the superstitious religions. But for now, people need gods, Robespierre says. So, at the height of the revolution, the people of Paris are surprised to see a papier-mâché mountain being built in one of the biggest open spaces in Paris. Yep, a papier-mâché mountain with a cave entrance. And Robespierre declares a national holiday. Everyone in Paris, or who's near Paris, should come and see this wonder that is the heart of the holiday. So people show up. And after some music and some drums, the great reveal. Out of the cave is carried on like a palanquin a statue of a female goddess a la Greek in Rome, which later becomes a basis for the Statue of Liberty. But this goddess is reclined. She is the goddess of reason. The goddess of reason. And walking with her, togate, that is, wearing a Roman toga and oak leaves, is Robespierre himself, escorting this goddess of reason. In so many words, instead of getting rid of religion entirely, as Hebert wants, Robespierre has taken away the old God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and replaced that God with a goddess of reason. And he encourages the people to worship. At this moment, people begin to question whether Robespierre is actually as sharp as everyone thinks he is. Because many Parisians look at the guy with his toga, with his trumped-up goddess, and ask, what could he possibly be thinking? But they didn't say it very loudly, because Robespierre still ran the Committee of Public Safety and had the power of sending them to the chop. The terror intensifies and becomes the Great Terror. During the Terror, dozens of people are executed every week at the guillotine. During the Great Terror, the intense phase, from Floréal to Thermidor year 2, there are dozens and then hundreds, over 100 people guillotined every week. Because the way you work towards revolution is like the way you make a topiary or a bonsai tree. You trim away the excess, and only your ideal remains. And the excess are religious believers, people who say Madame or Monsieur, people who forget what day it is according to the revolutionary calendar, counter-revolutionary spies and British agents, and anyone else who isn't properly revolutionary in their thought, word, and deed. Lots and lots of people. Country folk, too. However, in July of Thermidor, Robespierre makes a slight error.
When you have time, could you explain the calendar one more time?
Sure. If you look at it, you see a bunch of vertical columns. Each of these columns represents a revolutionary month. So the third month is Frimaire. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The 8th month is Floreal, and that corresponds to April and May. And by the way, the calendar again, it begins in September, not in January. Thermidor, July and August, so late July. And you go down. You got week 1, which is from days 1 to 10. And then week 2, which is days 11 through 20. And week 3, 21 to 30. Don't ask what the right-hand column is. I don't have a bleeping clue. I really don't.
It's the days of the months.
Mm-hmm.
The normal months. that
Oh!
correspond to.
That makes
Okay.
sense. Okay.
Thank you. You're smart. I don't always claim to be smart. I got about 2 hours of sleep last night, so my intelligence, such as it is somewhat limited today. But there it is. Does that explain it?
Yeah, thank you.
Did you notice anything else, Alex?
No.
Okay. Notice at the end there is this sort of holiday festival period, and that can deal with leap years and anything else, too, that you need to do. Robespierre, at the height of the terror, when again hundreds of people a week throughout France are being executed, goes into the Committee of Public Safety and says, "You won't believe this. I've gotten new intelligence that enemy agents are higher up in our government than we ever thought. These people are at the heart of our revolution. I've got the list right here." Who's on it? Everyone's afraid they're on it. Because by this point, accusation equals guilt, equals execution. Robespierre says, "I'm not gonna tell you until tomorrow," and he leaves. Robespierre should have understood human nature better, especially human nature involving death, because he's dealt so much of it. What he in effect just did is personally threatened every single person in that room by saying the new traitors are at the heart of the revolution. Nothing is closer to the heart of the revolution than the Committee of Public Safety. And by refusing to identify, if he had identified 2 or 3 people on the Committee of Public Safety, the rest of them would have gone after them like they went after everyone else Robespierre suggested, because at least they're not on the list this time. But by saying these people are at the heart of the revolution, but I'm not going to tell you who they are, building the suspense until tomorrow's meeting, Robespierre basically threatened every single person with possibly being on that list. What do you think they did the moment he left?
Conspired against it.
What?
Conspired against it.
They said, "Oh, he's got to die. He's got to be arrested today." And they voted, and Robespierre was made a traitor to the revolution. And he was arrested that afternoon. Now, he was going to be held overnight while the news that Robespierre turned out to be a traitor, the incorruptible act turned out to be corrupt, and the next morning he was going to be executed. He had some loyalists, though, among the guards. He smuggled in a pistol, musket pistol, but still a pistol, and he blew his jaw off. He tried committing suicide and messed it up. So the man whose voice and words killed thousands, possibly tens of thousands of his fellow Frenchmen, was silent and in agony the last 8 to 10 hours of his life because he went kabloom and shot his jaw off, or part of it. Finally, bandaged, he was brought up to the guillotine, and the crowd was cheering, of course, because they're used to cheering for this. This is justice, after all, revolutionary justice. And he's placed on the table and put forward, and his hair has been trimmed and wrapped so it's not going to foul the blade. And kathunk, his head flies from his body. Everyone's happy. Wouldn't you know it, after his death, the terror ends. No one could agree on where to stop. And this is something that you need to understand. It is a universal trait of ideologues, of zealots, of fanatics, of people who look at an ideal and measure everything against it. Nobody that has ever lived lives up to an ideal. There is no such thing as a perfect Christian or a perfect communist. Everyone has human divergence, human individuality, what a fanatic would call human weakness. If you have a bright enough light shined on anyone, you will see their flaws. If you take a camera and adjust the focus so that you are looking closer and closer and closer, you'll see the flaws in their skin, you'll see every blemish, you'll see that it's only from a certain distance that most people look pretty. What revolutions tend to do, ideological social revolutions, is when they enter their terror phase, everyone is measured against a set of abstract ideals that no one can possibly live up to. And sooner or later, everyone becomes a potential victim, and many people become a victim. And this usually only burns itself out when a new leadership is able to stop this. In Soviet Russia, it happened in the 1930s. Stalin got his secret police chief, the chief of the NKVD, their political police, to start the terror. And a lot of the people that were more senior to him in the Bolshevik movement were killed, or gulagged and then killed. But Yagoda was a threat because Yagoda was the tool Stalin used. So Stalin has Yagoda targeted, and there's a new guy called Yezhov. And Yezhov is this, again, a short fellow, but he's called a poisonous dwarf, so was Goebbels in Germany. And Yezhov ramped up the terror, and everyone was afraid. The Communist Party leadership was afraid because every night, a few times the secret police would come, and you were expected to have suitcases and be ready waiting by the door in case they stopped for you. And this intensified and intensified, show trial, purge, until finally Stalin targets Yezhov with a new secret police chief, Lavrenti Beria. And with Yezhov's death, every bad thing is blamed not on Stalin, who's the guy who organized it, but on Yezhov for going too far. And Beria was seen as a moderating force. Well, Beria was just as bloody-handed as any other head of the KGB or the NKVD, whatever it was called. Same thing happens here. With Robespierre dead, they can try to get a little bit back to normal. Now, my communist professors hated what happened at Thermidor. They saw Robespierre as burning away human frailty and building a new revolutionary order. And they saw his death as a betrayal of the revolution, and it being taken over by mediocrities. Well, here's what the mediocrities wanted. The mediocrities that were called the Directory, I'm wondering where they are on the notes, but I will put them here in this box. The Directory. The Directory is the committee that takes over the French Revolution. It abolishes the Committee of Public Safety. It ends the terror. The Directory's policy is actually very reasonable. What they say is, people can't live their lives, fall in love, get married, have children in an atmosphere of constant revolutionary terror. Society is breaking down. It's falling apart. And people who used to believe the revolution would bring them better lives are now suspecting that the revolution will bring nothing but guillotines and war. What we need to do is preserve the gains of the revolution by turning the intensity down, by normalizing the revolution, by allowing people to develop normal life under this new revolutionary order. So the Directory steps back from terror, back from de-Christianization, back from a lot of these extreme policies of brainwashing people through fear, and says, okay, we're in a republic, let's live like it. Now, the France is still at war with a number of European countries, and there's still fear of counter-revolution. But compared to Robespierre and the Committee of Public Safety and the Great Terror, what the Directory does seems like peacetime. It seems like the cessation of great pain that the country was in. People look at the Directory and the direction it's going, and most Frenchmen heave a sigh of relief, because maybe they won't die today or this week, because something they once said or did comes back and causes them to be found guilty in a revolutionary court and executed. So the Directory is trying to normalize revolution, which is actually, I think, a necessary step if you want it to succeed. But a lot of the pure-blood revolutionaries that you will meet look at Thermidor as the end of the real French Revolution and the beginning of a rule of bureaucrats, faceless betrayers, and so forth. Okay. With the arrival of the Directory and the end of Thermidor, we are shifting from the French Revolution to Napoleon. Let's talk about Napoleon Bonaparte. He is Corsican. Corsica is an island north of Sardinia, west of Italy, across the Ligurian Sea. It's south of France, and culturally, it's Italian. The countryside is similar to Sicily. And the culture of family violence called feuding is also like Sicily. And I say Sicily assuming that you understand that's where the American-Italian mafia comes from. Okay? In Sicily, there are families that are still fighting battles that go back hundreds of years. Your great-grandfather slighted my great-grandfather, did him out of a job. So my great-grandfather killed your great-grandfather, and we've been at war ever since. Now, Sicily isn't quite as bad as it used to be. The European Union moderates these things, but in Napoleon's time, Corsica was like this. Blood is what counts. The only people you can trust are your family. Family, family, family over all other considerations. And he grows up in a society where people engage in feuds and duel, and it's violent. Napoleon has a talent for military affairs, and he ends up getting a spot at the French Military Academy. So he is trained as a French officer and has a fairly undistinguished career until the time of the Directory. In the time of the Directory, the French Navy base on the Mediterranean coast is at a place called Toulon. Now, here's basically the coast and the harbor of Toulon. There's the Mediterranean Sea. And you've got the city. And you've got a series of forts around the city, around the harbor. And again, this is France's primary fleet base. But during the period after the September massacres, the British Royal Navy sends a battle fleet into Toulon Harbor, occupies the city, and occupies the forts. So now all of this is under British control, and the French have lost their naval base, and they've lost a city, and they've lost space and respect, and whenever anyone was sent by the Directory to clear the British from Toulon, the British, who have very good soldiers, clean their clocks. So no one is willing to take this job now because everyone who's taken it has been disgraced. So there's nobody of a Corsican. He's not even from the French mainland. He's barely from Suisse, which is a French stock. This Napoleon fellow. He wants it. Let's give it to him. After all, he's a nobody. If he fails, no big. So Napoleon is sent south. But Napoleon shares traits with only one other historical person, Alexander the Great. They both have pretty much the same skill set, and I'll tell you what that skill set is. First off, any good land commander has a sense of the ground. In other words, they look at where they expect to fight a battle, and they can see the hills as barriers, and forests as barriers, and fields as avenues and lanes of attack, and swamps as real barriers, and roads and bridges as choke points. And a good ground commander can look at a battlefield and anticipate what are the choke points, what are the important spots. But like Alexander the Great before him, Napoleon had an extraordinary ability in this regard. He could put things in motion, like running scenarios for a chess game. And he could find subtle spots on a battlefield that nobody else spotted. Also, like Alexander, he had an uncanny knack for human psychology. Now, this plays out in two ways. First off, Napoleon, just by watching how an enemy commander deploys his forces, Napoleon can read the psychology of that commander. Whether he's overconfident or overcautious, what he's afraid of, whether he's bold or whether he's timid, whether he is strong with infantry or cavalry or artillery. He can read the weaknesses, the psychological propensities of an enemy commander just by looking at how he moves his troops and how he places them. This is an amazing quality. Alexander the Great also had it. And what that means is, like Alexander, Napoleon is almost never going to lose a battle. By understanding the land and by understanding the psychological strengths and weaknesses of his opposite number, the enemy general, Napoleon can lead the enemy general into traps and then spring them, can divert the enemy general's attention over here when the real attack is coming over here. He can play head games effectively with the enemy general. This is a good skill to have. But that knack with people, that psychological affinity for understanding human beings, also plays out with his supporters. Like Alexander the Great, Napoleon knows how to encourage the loyalty of his own officers and soldiers. Famously, Napoleon says an army travels on its stomach. And what he means by that is feed your troops well. Provide for them well. Don't skimp on their food or they will resent you. But more than that, if one of his commanders makes a mistake, Napoleon will understand. Does this person need encouragement? Okay, I understand why you made that mistake. Let's try not to make that again, okay? Or whether he needs criticism. Wake up! This is war! What do you think we're doing? Playing tiddlywinks? Get in it! Or get out! And sometimes different people need encouragement or they need punishment. Napoleon had a way of building loyalty, of inspiring it, just as Alexander, to the point where Napoleon's officers and men, almost to a man, would rather die than disappoint him. So he is going to be a master of the battlefield, much as Alexander the Great was. At Toulon, this is revealed for the first time. Up until now, every French commander has approached this whole area as what needs to be cleared, and they've launched frontal attacks. Napoleon isn't going to play checkers with the British. He's going to play chess. He sees the weakness. The weakness doesn't require the French to attack across the board. All the French has to do is take this fort as a defensive line and take these two forts. And he's got enough forces for that. He doesn't need to scrimp. He doesn't need to waste his forces or disperse them too much. They're all going to this key point, like grabbing a person by their jugular vein, which is not easy to do, by the way, and holding on. You have their full attention. Can anyone tell me, by capturing these three forts, especially these two, what Napoleon is going to be able to do? Sam?
Is it blocking the shipping to the city?
Partially it's blocking, yes.
If he has those three forts, there's not near as much of a chance for the English who are in the harbor to get supplies from those forts. They can on the other side, but those three forts right there stretch out on a larger.
Excellent analysis. You both basically have it. With these forts, Napoleon can block any ships going through this narrow spot. The cannons will reach pretty much to the other side. He doesn't need to capture the forts over here. These will do. But not only can he block new supplies coming in and out, he can shell the fleet. He can fire his cannons and start damaging and sinking British warships. Now, these forts are on elevated bits of land. The warships, like the forts, are armed with smoothbore cannon, limited range. But smoothbore cannon, when you aim them too far up, have very short range. The British ships cannot effectively counterfire against those forts. By controlling those forts, Napoleon is able to damage the British fleet, maybe destroy it, and the British aren't able to effectively respond, not unless they send their Marines to take this fort. These forts. So Napoleon takes the forts, the British try counterattacking, they fail, and Britain has to pull out. Napoleon has jiu-jitsu'd the British out of Toulon. He didn't have to fight a conventional battle. He simply took the key place on the battlefield, and the British knew they couldn't stay. So they pulled their Marines out and left. Napoleon comes back to Paris a hero. The Directory is proud of him, and they're beginning to get a little afraid, because a man like him is charismatic in a way that they are not. And a charismatic leader could inspire the Paris mob and the revolution. However, they give Napoleon the job commandant of the forces in Paris. So Napoleon is now leader of the army in Paris, and that's where we'll leave it. Thank you. Have a good day.
Wait, so this is happening after the Reign of Terror? So
Yes.
gets killed and then Napoleon kind of comes in? Like,
Well, Robespierre gets killed, the Directory comes in, and Napoleon rises, see it, under the Directory.